the moderator of one event. Patricia is an Italian, I would say, because you have been living in Italy many years. But of course, from her accent, you will find out that she is American 100%. And I hope that you will enjoy her talk and that you will make so many questions that I am sure she will be delighted to answer. Thank you, Patricia. The floor is yours.
Good morning, all of you. Good to see you again. How many of you were here on Friday? A lot of you. Oh, you're a wonderful group. I really like you. Not just because you're global governance students, but you were all great at asking questions. And I was so sorry it got cut off because I knew you all had really good questions. And you all look so nice. Did someone tell you have to get dressed up? Yeah. Well, you look great. And I think it's great to be dressed up. And if you want to be journalists, I actually think it helps sometimes to look nice. You make, as the Italians say, bella figura. And you maybe get a little more access to things. I think I'll stand up so I can see you all better. And I hope you'll ask a lot of questions. I think we only have an hour. So I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I work for Associated Press. It is the biggest international news agency in the world. And I'll get to what we do now, but I just want to tell you a little bit about the history of the Associated Press. It started in 1846, and a group of 5 newspapers in New York City couldn't afford to have correspondents down on the Mexican border to report about the US-Mexican War. So they put their money together and they created this associated group of press. And they put a journalist down there on the border, and then the reports, the dispatches were sent back on by a Pony Express, the Pony Express that we know now. The delivery service was actually born as a concept in the United States, with these people galloping across the United States with little dispatches. So it started that way, and then it became this huge thing in the United States, which was all these newspapers participate in it. It's a nonprofit still to today. They participated in this service, paying for this service so that they could have journalists all over the world that would provide dispatches or provide reports that then could go to all these newspapers across the United States. But each individual, whether it was the Los Angeles Times or the Chicago Tribune or the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Boston Globe, they couldn't afford to have journalists in all these places around the world. So by coming together and all contributing to the Associated Press, they could do that. It's changed dramatically since then. Newspapers are dying off, as you all know. So it's always primarily a subscriber-based service for hundreds, maybe even thousands, subscribers. But we have radio, TV, photos. It's not just a print thing. But even so, it's changed very dramatically in the past 30 years with the way news has been changing and media has been changing and technology has been changing. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. I started being a journalist. Let's see, I started with AP 30 years ago, but I was already doing journalism for about 8 years before that. Back when I started, there were no cell phones. I'm a dinosaur. I'm a very active dinosaur and trying to keep up to date dinosaur, but I'm sort of a journalistic dinosaur because I started when there weren't any cell phones, there wasn't any internet. You could go out and do a story, and I like to give this example. I went to work for a year in the Philippines, and I went off in the mountains with the communist rebels, and I stayed there a week, and I come back out of the mountains, and I'd been staying at this little hotel that I went back to, and back then you didn't have the card key either. You had a little key hanging on a thing. So in my little socket, whatever it is, where my key was at the front desk, there was a little note from CBS Radio saying, please call when you get back. And that for me, in a sense, that was the good old days, because you had time to think about a news story, contemplate a news story, get the facts right, check everything, and then do it. It was also, sometimes it was extremely frustrating because to send a radio report from the island of Negros in the Philippines was not very easy. Phone lines didn't work, whatever. But it was enormously satisfying for journalists back then just to have the time to think about things. Now we don't have that time anymore. It's constant, it's coming at you, and you guys know that better than I do. I said this also on Friday. It's hitting you from all directions, from Twitter and TikTok and YouTube and and all these bits of news coming at you in 24-hour TV channels. And it's very hard to distinguish what is accurate, what is facts, and what is not. And AP has made its huge logo now, fact-based journalism. And we try really hard to grab onto these facts and be the ones that tell the facts. But it's extremely hard when everything's live and you don't have time to check things because you're showing a lot. But I'll give you a little example. In August, this big sailboat sunk off the coast of Sicily with this British entrepreneur, Mike Lynch. And this, I think there were 22 people on the boat, and I think 7 went down with the boat, and it became a huge story, which again, that's a whole nother issue that we can get into. I've covered tons of migrant shipwrecks since over the last 30 years. And the attention that the world media gives to that wasn't the same as it gives to this huge wealthy ship that costs sailboat that cost luxury yacht that costs 200,000 euros a week to rent. And so suddenly the entire media, the foreign press in Italy, was down on the dock in Sicily doing live coverage of firefighters, scuba divers, and coast divers, scuba divers, trying to get the bodies of these people who had died and stuck in the bottom of the ship out. And we were providing live coverage from the dock as the divers were coming back and they were bringing bodies, and people were reporting all sorts of things. Oh, that's the body of David Lynch. That's the body of this and that. Michael Lynch, not David Lynch. Anyway, and AP got in great difficulty because we couldn't always get confirmation as we were seeing these bodies, and the firefighters who were in charge of the scuba divers weren't answering or weren't commenting. The Coast Guard refused to comment. The families didn't want to talk to it. It's very hard in these circumstances to be doing fact-based journalism, and yet that's what we have to do. What's the other thing that has changed dramatically? Well, again, is live and streaming. Since COVID, everything, we used to in Rome go, I work in the TV side of AP, go to Palazzo Chigi, the Prime Minister's office, go there, cover meetings and events and press conferences and ask questions to the Prime Minister. Now the Prime Minister goes around, Giorgia Meloni, and others as well, with a personal camera person who gives us video events like a statement. Meloni meets with Vladimir Zelensky at Palazzo Chigi, and they come out and they make a statement. They don't let the press in. Rarely. They just let a few cameras in, a few photographers, and then they just send us their official camera person's video. So we can't ask them questions. We're given the material either in streaming or handout. And so we're dealing with material coming in and writing stories off statements and video statements. So it's extremely difficult. We have to sort of fight to get in there and ask people what's going on. And part of being a journalist is speaking truth to power, asking Giorgia Meloni, what are you doing with that migrant center in Albania? Why are you sending the migrants to Albania? What's gone wrong with it? And yet it's very difficult if you're not given access to her press conference. For example, also last Friday, Meloni went to Beirut. We have journalists in Beirut. Luckily for us, AP has a bureau, and maybe unluckily these days, but AP does have a bureau in Beirut, and so they were able to cover her. But she did not take journalists on the plane with her. So I was getting video in Rome from her. Filippo Attili, her personal cameraman, was sending us stuff to all the journalists who wanted it in Rome. So we had pictures and material and comments of her from Beirut, but we weren't there with her asking the questions. Fortunately, as I said, for AP, we do have a bureau, but it's rare. We're a big international organization. So we also had journalists on the ground there. But sadly, this has become a big, frustrating part of our job, especially since COVID. It got worse since COVID because everybody realized they could do everything in streaming. Another big part of my job here in Rome is that we cover Pope. I've covered several popes, and AP, because there's a huge interest in the Vatican and the popes around the world, because there's billion Catholics out there, we always get to travel with the Pope. So that's the one person. So it's sort of like the President of the United States. All the journalists, actually, AP journalists always travel with the President. They have, well, there's Air Force One, and then they have a separate plane for journalists, but we're always traveling with the President. Actually, little aside on that. We're always on the President. We're always on the candidates. AP is very proud of how it covers politics in the United States. That's our number one thing that AP does, because we sort of have a capillary system in the United States where we're with many states covering many candidates. And so we were very proud of the fact that we had two photographers who were just covering Trump as the Republican candidate, who were right in front of him when he got shot in Pennsylvania. So the photographer, one of the photographers, got the shot that now has become iconic of that moment, where you see the Secret Service guys trying to take him off the podium, and he's in fight and blood's coming out of his head. So these are really important moments, and that's what AP needs to be doing. We need to be there. We need to be covering things in person, whether it's the photographers, the camera, what we call video journalists, asking the questions. Which brings me to another point. Journalism, when I started out, was you're a print reporter, or you're a radio reporter, or you're a TV reporter, or you're a camera person, or you're a photographer. That's gone. You have to be everything. You have to do everything. You have to know how to write. You have to know how to talk on radio. You have to know how to talk in front of a camera. You don't have to do it all perfectly well. You can be better at something. You need to know how to do photos, because just given the way things are moving so quickly and things are changing so rapidly, if something happens, I mean, if this building blew up right now and a terror attack or something, I would have to just pick up my phone and do it all by myself right now and start filing right away. Because there's no time to bring in a photographer. Well, actually the AP Bureau is quite near. They could probably arrive, but still it's all so instantaneous that we all have to be able to do everything right away. There's other really interesting technological things that have changed our lives. I was talking about the lives. We now have what we call a live view, which are these little backpack-like things that we can take around and just switch on and go live, that have 8 SIM cards, the phone cards in them, so we can go live pretty much anywhere at any time. We have something called trinting, which is very cool, and it makes our work a lot easier, but again, it makes everything so fast. So for example, let me take it back a step. We also have a big cloud system, and they're asking us now to work in the cloud. So you might have a G7 summit going on in Puglia, as it went on in June. And AP will get all the material, the video from the host broadcaster, which was Rai in this case. And it'll just go, so at the end, like for example, Macron is giving his press conference there, and Meloni's giving her press conference there, and Schultz is giving his press conference there, and Biden's giving his press, and they can put all those out live from the host broadcaster. AP sticks it up in its cloud out there. Then our journalists around the world can work inside our cloud, which they call Mamir. So my French colleagues can go in and edit the video and write the story of Macron, watch the Macron press conference, and do it all from Paris. In addition, the system does live trinting. Trint is a system where it just takes the audio and transcribes it. So not only do they have Macron's press conference coming in, but it's being transcribed as he speaks. So they hear him say, I don't know, Le Pen. He said something about Marine Le Pen. And so you want to get that comment, then you just type in Marine Le Pen, and it'll take you to the point in the video where he says that, and you can listen to it. So this makes it all very efficient and all very wonderful and all very fantastic, but also very, very frustrating, because then they don't send, we sent some people to Puglia to cover the G7, but they don't send a huge team, which helps give better coverage and get better background and get more information on what's happening. So that's part of it. Oh, so I was trying to say, yeah, so the one good thing though I get to do is I get to travel all over the world with the Pope. And that's incredibly satisfying to be there, to actually see things. I was just with the Pope on his trip to Brussels. He went to Asia as well. I did not get to do that trip, but it's so much better when you can be there and see the expressions and film it and talk about it. And that feels like real reporting, but we have to do all the kinds of reporting these days. It's part of what it is. It's changed dramatically. So let's see, what else? The sort of basics of journalism have remained the same. You need to interview a lot of people. You need to confirm things. You need to work on your sources. You need to hunt down information. You need to, be good at asking questions. So that has remained the same. It's just frustrating sometimes how, in a sense, we seem to be becoming more removed from the issues and the subjects that we're following. Anyway, why don't I open it up already to questions that might stimulate some more. Oh, here, I think there's a microphone here. Oops. Go, Jason.
So hello, my name is Calypso Linassi. I'm a GGU student, so thank you for your presentation. My question is regarding the neutrality in media, because as we've seen these past few years, in a lot of countries, the political, the political our environments are becoming increasingly polarized within the United States and other countries. For example, like I'm from France, a country where recently there has been a parliamentary election. And a lot of people have lost their trust in the media because they all, from any side of the political spectrum, they accuse the media of being biased, of not being neutral enough. So my question is, as part of the Associated Press, what kind of actions do you do to ensure you can remain as neutral as possible, if that's something that's possible to achieve? Thank you.
Excellent question. It is absolutely forefront and center of AP's thoughts and all our bosses' thoughts right now, because we have this election going on in the United States, and they're scared because the accusations are coming from both sides that you're biased on this and you're biased on that. And they, AP keeps on priding itself, we are the trustworthy, we're the fact-based, but they are so hard on us employees right now. They keep on sending us messages. Do not tweet, do not tweet. You barely can tweet about your cat without them getting on your case. We have to be so careful. Your football team or soccer team or whatever you call it. We have to be incredibly careful because there's so much tension there, so much pressure to not say anything that would be anti-Trump, anti-Kamala, even anti other parts of the press. There was a very difficult, tense interview with Kamala Harris the other day on Fox News. And so we have to be very careful. We can't say, people were taking sides. We can't say it's extremely polarized. I don't think I've ever seen my country so polarized. And AP is very, very tense about that because it's just so hard I think we're 3,000 journalists all around the world, or employees anyway, to hold in our opinions. And much worse than US politics right now is the Israeli-Palestinian question. It is so difficult for AP to cover that one. We have, as I was saying, a bureau in Gaza, a bureau in Cairo, a bureau in Jerusalem, a bureau in Beirut. We've got people everywhere. The Israelis bombarded our building where our offices were in Gaza, which created in the past, not in this latest war, which created enormous tension. And they were all saying, when that happened, we were getting messages from our boss: don't criticize Israel, don't say anything about Israel. It's, we're going to work it out with the IDF, but be careful. There's a lot of tension. They don't want AP ever to be seen as taking sides, and yet we're fact-based journalism, and there's a lot of facts there that need to be told every day and really pushed, and also visual things, decisions about what do you show, how many dead children do you show, what do you show in terms of bombing. And it's very complicated also because the Israelis have a very sophisticated public relations propaganda as a nation, and the Palestinians do not. So how do you cover that? There, I mean, it's just so hard right now, and I think it's hard elsewhere as well, in France and in any country, you name it, the Ukrainian, the Russian question. It's extremely difficult. So I would say it's like we're walking on broken glass every day, just trying not to cut ourselves to try and stay to be respected as being non-biased in the world the way it is now.
Thank you. I'm Elena Argentieri, a GD2 student, and I have two questions. One regarding the one that Calypso said. In your career, you just said that speaking the truth is actually really hard. And have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to suppress your values and morals in order to write? And if you had, how did you manage the situation? And my second question is, what do you advise for young people that now want to be part of journalism, where we have an audience that changed since like 30 years ago, and that now wants to have fast information and also oversimplified maybe, because like also 15 years ago, journals were like 30 pages and now they're practically non-existing, like paper journals, and people that want information fast and simplified, and also fast ideas, and like that's my question.
Okay, I'll start with the second question. It's extremely hard. And again, AP is struggling with that because we have our longer reports, but now AP is on YouTube and Twitter, and they want us to transform our stories in versions for TikTok and Instagram. So you might do a longer story, but at the same time, often they appreciate it more. Last summer, I did something on the city of Rome's plans to make people pay €2 and let people in small groups to see the Trevi Fountain. And at the last minute, I just went and stood in front of the Trevi Fountain and said, blah, 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 you throw your coin in the Trevi Fountain, you'll have to pay €2. And they put it on social media, and it was this huge success. And all my bosses are going, and I thought, oh no, like I have to do that kind of journalism now. And again, that's like I said, I'm a dinosaur that's trying to adapt. And this last week, I was working on this thing for, well, we always prepare, all journalists all the time have always prepared obits for important people, obituaries. So we've prepared a lot of obituaries because the Pope will be 88 in December, and he's not in perfect health. And if he passes away, it's going to be a huge story. So in the past, you just had one obituary. This is his life. Now we've got sort of themed obituaries. So this was what the Pope did for the environment, and this is what the Pope did for migrants, and this is how he handled sex abuse in the church. And then on top of that, they're asking me, and I was working on this last week, to do like 1 minute voiced versions, but covered with video of his sex abuse legacy. So how he handled sex abuse in the church. And that's a really complicated thing to do. So again, I would go back to saying, if you want to be journalists, you have to be able to do everything, the short, quick, but it's not easy to do the short and quick stuff all the time. It takes some talent, but also the more in-depth, and also working across formats. Cross-format is key. As far as suppressing my values, well, I gave the example earlier of that ship, that sailboat, that luxury yacht going down. And we were giving all this attention and sending alerts. Oh, they found, they pulled out the body now of Michael Lynch, alert, alert. And I've covered the migrant ship that went down in Cutro with 180 people and bodies washing up on the shore. And yes, we sent crews and we were covering it, but we weren't covering it with that intensity. We weren't spending that much money to keep a camera live on the rescue operations. And that really bothered me. And that bothered not just me, many of my colleagues here in Rome, because we've been covering the situation with migrants for so long, and we've seen a lot deaths and absolutely tragic things happen. And we said it to our bosses and they kind of ignored us. They said, oh, but there's, AP is working for our subscribers. So our subscribers aren't newspapers anymore so much as websites and TV channels that use our material. And I said, but everybody's interested in this story and they want it. We have to be somewhat driven by our subscribers. So yes, that was extremely frustrating. I have a lot of personal interest. Like I've been interested in the situation with migrants. I've also interested in the situation with women. I did a big, so to say that often I'm allowed to pursue things that fit with my values. So I did a big thing on Nigerian women who were being sex trafficked to Italy. I did something last year on women in Puglia fighting the local mafia, the Sacra Corona Unita. I like focusing stories on women. And so I get to do a lot of things that do fit with my values, and AP gives me the space to do it. But often on big stories, you find yourself, maybe I wouldn't cover this way, or I'm not there, so I can't ask the question. As I was saying at the beginning, I can't ask Meloni a question because I'm not in front of her. I'm not being given that opportunity. So it's not easy, but I think AP as a big organization that's pumping out a lot of news every day gives its journalists a lot of space to pursue, if you really want to pursue what you're interested in, what you want to talk about.
Hi, I'm Filippo Zacchilli. You mentioned how the work of a journalist changed over the past 30 years. And I wanted to know, what do you think about the future of the work of a journalist? So maybe, I guess, how artificial intelligence could interact with the job of a journalist, and how this changing of expressing news is going to develop in the further years.
Ouch, that's a hard question. Okay, I'm going to reveal something to you, although it's not secret, but not many people know about it. AP, because it's hard also to keep our income coming in this difficult market. The head of AP made the decision to sell, I think, 20 years worth of AP archive material so copyright AP, to ChatGPT or one of them. So they put to train their system. So they can put these AP stories into the system. And then when you type in what happens during a conclave, then the system's been trained that it'll actually have read AP articles and can feed back something that was originally copyright AP. This obviously was not done with the permission of all the journalists from AP, because part of working for AP is the company owns the copyright, we don't own it individually. So a lot of people got really upset and angry and like, wait a minute, my story on the Vatican can be chewed up and spit out by I can't remember if it was ChatGPT or one of the other ones, but can be spit out and used in some different way. And people got really upset, but there's nothing we could do about it. And our boss came, and she came to Rome, among other places, and she said, look, we got a lot of money. We were paid a lot for that. And you guys want the budget to go out and do news stories. And it's a really hard market right now. So we need, I mean, in a sense, people are like, yeah, we've sold ourselves to the devil on this one. So it's a really important issue right now. People within the system are struggling with it. AP is struggling with it. They made this first decision. Again, our articles cannot be used by ChatGPT it's a training thing, but still, it really bothered a lot of people. And then, of course, there's the constant question of, well, do you really need a journalist anyway? Do you really, I mean, just tell ChatGPT to write the story about Meloni meeting Zelensky or the Pope going to Brussels. It's a huge concern. So I don't know where it's going. I have no idea. I just hope to hang on a little longer. Nick?
Hi, I'm Nina Signalini, and I would like to ask you if you ever felt being censored during your career, and like how strong is censorship in this environment, and if you capture some difference regarding the freedom of speech in the United States or working in the EU. So if you felt some difference
Working in Europe?
Yes.
No, I don't think I've ever felt censored by AP. I feel, as I was saying before, censored not in terms of the news stories I'm doing. I can say whatever I want in terms of what I'm doing, but this whole business of you can't, you have to be really careful about what you say in terms of the US elections, what you say in terms of various conflicts around the globe. So I have never felt censored, and I don't think there's a huge difference in Europe either. But again, it's a very tense environment. And perhaps if I were working in the Middle East right now, I would say I would be answering this question differently. I don't know. But personally, no, I've never felt censored. Also, there's a lot of delicate issues I know from colleagues around Ukraine and Russia because of risks. AP moved a whole bunch of correspondence out of Russia. One has to be very careful what one says. The whole war situation. When you're in a war situation, there's a lot more censorship. Also, just again, Israel at a certain point, we keep a camera live pointed at Gaza from southern Israel. At a certain point, the Israeli government was cracking down on Al Jazeera and kicking them out. And AP provides, Al Jazeera is a client of AP, and we provide video, photos, and news reports. And so they came and they said, you can't have this camera here showing what's happening in Gaza because you're giving it to Al Jazeera. And they forced us to take down our camera. So that's censorship. We fought that, and the camera's back, and it's okay. But again, I think there might be a lot going on, both in the situations where there is censorship of what AP is doing, and AP has to fight it. Personally, in Rome, I don't feel that very much.
Sorry. I wanted to ask about how many years you worked here in Italy, and what are your thoughts on Italian press? What do you know about it? Some journalists that you met, some newspapers that you maybe advise to us, some things like that.
I've been working for 30 years in Italy. I know a lot of Italian journalists. I admire a lot of Italian journalists. I think there's a lot of great journalism in Italy. I think Italian journalists like to hear American journalists criticize them and say other journalists are horrible. And I don't like to fall into that trap. I mean, at AP every day we get and we read online, Corriere della Sera, La Repubblica, Il Messaggero. We also have a sports correspondent, Gazzetta dello Sport. I just watch Rai Uno every night, not because I necessarily like the coverage so much, but because I get it in my house. So we have Sky News 24 and Rai News 24 on all day in the office. But then there are a lot of people like Annalisa Camilli, a friend of mine who works doing migration for the Rivista Internazionale. She's probably the best migration reporter in Italy right now. I love Annalisa. She's bravissima. I don't know, Marina Sapia, who used to work with us, is now at Rai Uno, and she does some really good interviews on international geopolitical things. Lily Gruber, I'm a huge fan of Lily Gruber. I like her. She's really tough, and nobody can mess with her. Who else? Angela Caponetto is another Rai one who's really good at migration issues. I'm friends with Massimo Franco from Corriere della Sera, who's got this capacity to understand Italian politics better than anyone. Oh gosh, there's so many that I like. So I'm not going to criticize Italian journalists. I mean, some people would, but I just don't feel. Of course, like anywhere else, it's polarized as well, and there are parts on both sides of things. But there are a lot of really talented Italian journalists, I think. All right then.
Hi, my name is Maya Pandit, and thank you again for coming here. I have a few questions. I work for a student organization, a nonpartisan, not really news, but kind of solutions-based journalism organization. And we kind of seek to differentiate ourselves by promoting the idea that more information or more clear opinions instead of censorship or self-censorship lead to a more educated population? Would you agree or disagree with the idea that instead of censoring yourself, even as a journalist working for, a fact-based journalism organization, do you think that being allowed to state your opinion or writing, purely opinion pieces, do you think that that would lead to a more civically educated population, especially in the US, or not? Or do you
Yes.
think? And my second question is, how do you keep yourself motivated through what sounds like a rat race of a job, and what sounds like, with so many new factors, like, again, AI, reels, hot takes, videos, how do you keep yourself motivated, even seeing the transition from short form to long form content? And what do you think makes a good journalist? What do you think made you a good journalist? And what are some qualities that you think are necessary to have innately? Thank you.
Okay, first question. I have tons of opinions myself, and yes, sometimes it's hard to suppress them. So absolutely, I'm in favor of opinion-based journalism. There's room for that out there. Go for it. And there are tons of stuff out there now that's great, and podcasts and documentaries and absolutely solutions. I have 3 kids. My youngest is 24, and she just graduated with a master's degree in human rights, and she's always on my case about not speaking out or AP not being strong enough on human rights. So, and she's also all about solutions, and she thinks that AP isn't all about solutions. So I'm all in. I listen to her. It doesn't change what I do, but I listen to her, and I absolutely believe that there are many kinds of journalism, and AP is definitely not the best. It's a good kind. We need AP. We need Reuters. We need Agence France-Presse. We need agency journalism. But we do need other kinds of journalism. And opinions are a great thing, I think. What keeps me motivated? Well, maybe I've been too negative. I have had the most incredible experiences working for AP in Italy, covering heartbreaking stories like earthquakes and people buried under their homes. But I've also covered art and history. I've climbed up on the scaffolding of people who were cleaning the curls on Michelangelo's David, and looking down at his curl. I mean, how many jobs in the world do you get to climb up on above Michelangelo's David in Florence and look down at his curls as restorers are cleaning the dust and the dirt out of them, or in his ears or in his nose? It's really cool. And I've been I'm trying to think. Well, I don't know. Last year I went to the Congo and South Sudan to cover Pope Francis. I mean, when would I go to South Sudan? It was fascinating and amazing. So those are going out in the field. I'm just even doing that story last year on the women fighting the mafia and talking to these women and going around with them. They were so courageous, and no, I've had fantastic experiences with AP, and that keeps me motivated every day. Also, I'm totally passionate about news. I always want to be there and know what's happening and see what's going on. And I just love it. I mean, I think that's what motivates me every day. I don't know, I'll give a stupid example. 30 years ago, one of the first stories I did was I went out with a cameraman covering a huge union strike. And you follow the strikers, they march through Rome, they've got their flags and they're yelling and there's smoke bombs and sometimes it's clashes with police. And on Friday, there was a metal workers strike in Rome, and I had to do it again. And they were marching from Piazza Barberini to Piazza del Popolo. And I stopped with a camera person on the stairs at Tenida dei Monti, and we were filming them passing by with their flags and their smoke bombs and their chants. And you could see the Vatican in the distance. And it was such a beautiful shot. And I thought, I love this job. I mean, it's not like I don't know. I just love it. Rome is a great place to be. It's interesting. You're seeing these people protesting, even though it's very similar to 30 years ago. It's being out there, seeing what people are doing, talking to people. Obviously, we do interviews as well. I don't just stand there and film them. So passion, obviously curiosity. I love talking to people. I love asking questions. I will talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. I will ask them anything. I'm not shy. I love telling people's stories. I feel like storytelling is a big part of what it is all about. You want to get to know what people have to say and what their experience is. And I find everybody's story fascinating, no matter who it is I'm talking to. There are always stories out there to be told. So that really keeps me going. And I know a lot of people aren't like that, who could care less. You know, I don't know, but I could go down to the bar now and interview the barista about, I don't know, how they make cappuccino. And for me, it would be fun. So that's my problem, I guess. Anyway, did I get all the question? Was there another one? Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, I'm Arianna Napoli, and my question was about imbalances in the coverage. Because, for instance, if we think of natural disasters, they tend to have less coverage during the Olympics. Or if we think just of Sanremo, we hear only about Sanremo at the news. And this creates a sort of blind spots in the news. And for instance, some main geopolitical events are omitted or downsized. So how can journalism in this really competitive environment in which all attention is brought to a certain the event of the day, detach itself for what we could call performative journalism dictated by the audience interest? Thank you.
That's a tricky one. I see it on a larger scale. Worldwide, huge stories in Africa are not getting covered. Monkeypox monkeypox is, people are dying, I don't know by how many, and compared to COVID, what we covered for COVID, or the war in Sudan right now, where 25 million people might go hungry. And we're all kind of sitting here in Sudan and nobody's covering it or reading about it. So there's a huge problem on a worldwide level of us covering the G7 summit and covering the Olympics and covering, every time Trump says whatever, or Biden or whoever. It's a huge problem. And as I was saying earlier with that luxury yacht thing, it is driven in a way by what people want to learn about. And that's the sad truth. AP now keeps track every day of when we put our stories on our website, how many clicks we get for this, how many clicks for that. And so they're following what people are interested in. Now, there are things that we cover standardly, like the Olympics, like big events, but it is pushed partly by the consumers, which is negative in a way, because people aren't showing a lot of interest in Africa. I think I've noticed like the French TV channels show a lot more interest in Africa, which is a good thing. But it's a big problem and it needs to be changed. I do think natural disasters are actually pretty well covered. Now, for us in Italy, we used to cover them all ourselves. Now, again, just going back to this thing about getting material from others, the Italian firefighters are become really good at covering things themselves. And they send us material from helicopters and provide us comments, and they have the scuba divers. And so when we're provided by reliable sources with good video material, it makes us less likely to go there and self-cover, which is unfortunate in many ways. But no, it's a problem. And again, that goes back to the earlier question about other kinds of news coverage, or people who are looking for opinions stuff. Opinion coverage could also mean not just giving your personal opinion, but actually covering something that's not being covered by the mainstream media. So I would encourage that in any possible way to go ahead, if you're interested in doing that, to do that.
Okay, I'm Pietro Bagnasco, and I wanted to ask you if you ever felt in your long experience, an occasion, a news when it was, you felt it was very dangerous, maybe, to cover that story, to share that news, that that in that case it was a dangerous situation. We were exposing maybe your figure to dangerous people, and there may be a retaliation or a response or consequence of some kind due to your news, or if you've seen colleagues do that, and in the case, how it is to make a stand of that kind of choosing in a way that hill to stand for. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'm not the right person to ask that question because, again, I work in Italy, so it's not like working in Moscow or Kiev. or in the Middle East. I mean, physically in danger, I go back to the year I spent in the Philippines, and I'm sort of young, adventurous, and I got in the middle, there was a coup attempt, and the coup leaders took over the military headquarters, and with about 6 other journalists, we snuck in the back gate of these military headquarters, and we were trying to get an interview with the coup leader, and we were waiting outside the main headquarters building. It was this big area, and all of a sudden there was shooting started everywhere, and we all just ran to wherever we could find. Anyway, I ended up in a bathroom on this military base for 8 hours, lying on the floor with some other people because they were shooting everywhere. So that was when I physically felt in danger. But then when I got out, I managed to get out 8 hours later, climbing over a back wall and get back to where I could report. And I didn't feel any problem reporting exactly what I'd seen. I had a colleague, Gianfranco, who came under, was arrested in Albania. He was reporting on during an election and got arrested. So there have been situations. I'm trying to think what else. Football matches. Tifosi, ultras can become very aggressive with journalists. So we just don't cover that. We're like, it's not worth. We don't care. AP can fire us, but we're just not going to go out there and cover matches with ultras, fighting each other with the police. That's not worth it for us. Other times in Rome, I've been in tense demonstrations where people start throwing cobblestones. Things get tense. I worked for years with this. He was really a cameraman. He wasn't a video journalist. He just did camera, and he loved covering this stuff. And so I learned Gianfranco, and so I learned from him. And when things get tense, you go behind the police lines and just stay back. And AP teaches us all sorts of techniques. They make us take courses for what you do when you're in a demonstration and someone gets angry because they don't want to be filmed, and they're in your face and they're yelling at you. You back off. You don't try and continue to interview them. You don't get in their face. You put down the camera. This cameraman that I worked with for so many years, he was a big smoker, but he would just put the camera on a tripod, leave it rolling, and then smoke a cigarette. Like, he wasn't filming or anything, but he was always filming. Or he always kept an extra scheda, the memory card, tucked in the side. So if the police in Albania, not so much in Italy, we need your card now. We'd give us your memory card. He'd just say, okay, here it is. And he'd give them an empty one, and we'd still have our regular one. So yeah, there are a lot of circumstances. I think AP journalists came under real threat when the January 6th mob went on the Capitol, and they attacked some of our journalists outside the Capitol, and because they think of us, again, AP worrying about showing sides. These people thought that AP was part of the mainstream media that was anti-Trump, and they took our cables and they turned them into a noose, and they threatened our reporters. It was really bad. And AP doesn't like to talk about that because, again, they're always trying to not get involved in these things. But yes, there are circumstances where one is threatened and has to really, we're taught to just back off, step back. Don't worry about the news story in that moment. Worry about saving yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Orko Provo. I'm a GG2. My question is, what are the main resources that you as a AP journalist, as a AP correspondent, use in your everyday life? Like, by main resources, what I'm asking is, for example, do you use other media agencies resources, like, for example, BBC or CNN? Do you use their resources? Because you have the access to AP cloud, right? I don't know if you can have the access to their clouds as well, and how you use their resources, and the internet of resources. Do you go in their website, or do you call them? Like, how the lifestyle of a journalism work, of a journalist work? How do you manage all the resources of the world? Information specifically, and get to know and collect and store the right informations for your own purposes. Like, how this whole management thing work for you? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, that's an excellent question. AP as a news agency has to be the resource for others. We have to be all over the place and providing news for other news organizations. So we wouldn't be taking it from BBC. They are one of our clients, by the way. They're taking it from us. That said, any AP journalist is expected to be well informed. So, you know, listen to the BBC, watch the BBC, New York Times, Economist, Guardian, Italian newspaper. We're all supposed to be informed across the media from other news sources. Then for those of us who work in Italy, ANSA is very important to us. AP actually has an agreement with La Presse, so we can get information from them and use them. We have an agreement with Sky Italia that we can get video material for them. So we have sources like that. Then, as I said, we have, like we get handout video from the Prime Minister's office or from the firefighters. There's a lot of, the President's office, Mattarelli's office gives us material. We get material we have an agreement with the Vatican. So every private audience of the Pope behind closed doors, we're not allowed to self-cover, so they will give it to us. So we have a lot of resources. Then there are other kinds of resources, informational resources. The UN High Commission for Refugees has all sorts of data on their website that is really reliable regarding migrants. So that's important to me when I'm covering migrant stories. The Italian Interior Ministry keeps track of every migrant that arrives every day by sea and lots of other information as well. So there are a lot of government ministries that have useful information, then nonprofits that have, like UNHCR, and also the International Organization for Migration provides a lot of information. So it depends, you know, what exactly you're covering. I have a colleague who's our dedicated Vatican correspondent, and has done a lot on sex abuse. And she has all sorts of organizations that track and keep track of sex abuse around the world, or cases of clergy sex abuse, and can provide her accurate data. So there are tons of different, but it's very important to have ones that you can trust. You can't just start, you know, pulling numbers out of a hat, because that's what real journalism is, knowing that your information is reliable.
Hi,
Hi.
Samuel here, GG alumnus. My question is very simple. Patricia, how did you become an AP correspondent?
As I said, I had a passion from a very young age that I wanted to become a journalist. My family, we were living when I was in the 1970s in Kenya for 3 years. And we knew the family there, where the father was the New York Times correspondent. And I just loved this idea of being able to go anywhere and ask people questions. I mean, even now when I go on vacation, I can't just go on vacation. I like have to go to this fishing village and ask the fishermen what kind of they fish, and is global warming affecting their fishing. I can't stop being a journalist. I love it so much. So I started, I grew up in the Boston area, and but I like TV. I really like visuals. And I like photography as well. So I wanted to work in the TV side. So I started doing summer internships with the local TV that wasn't paying me. So I had to work in a restaurant at night, but I cared so much about it that I just started doing it from a very young age. And then I married, as you all know, I told you the other day, I married Gustavo Piga. So I ended up over here and becoming, and got the job with AP. And it's all worked out for the better. Actually, though, I had been planning when I met Gustavo, I was getting a degree in international affairs at Columbia University, and he was getting a PhD in economics. And I was focusing on Southeast Asia, because I was going to go back to, after I'd been in the Philippines, I wanted to go back and cover Southeast Asia. And then I ended up marrying him and coming here. And then suddenly I had to cover the Vatican. And covering the Vatican back in the early 90s, when I first arrived, when John Paul II, first of all, I'm not Catholic. I didn't know anything about the Catholic Church, or hardly anything. And I didn't understand anything about the culture of the Catholic Church. And back in the 90s, Vatican's the Vatican. It's like this male hierarchy. It didn't really have a very open attitude towards women back then. And it was really hard. Like the first time I went to interview a cardinal, I'm like, oh my God, do I have to kiss his ring? I can't kiss his ring. What do I do? And fortunately, it was a New York cardinal, and he walked in and he's like, hey, how you doing? And I didn't have to kiss his ring, and I never had to kiss a ring, and I never would kiss a ring. But it was just a really intimidating world to me. And they I'll tell you one more thing about that. The first interview I had with a bishop inside the Vatican. I go up to, first of all, you have to dress, going around the Vatican, like women have to cover their shoulders, you have to cover your knees. So I was like dressed up like a nun. I go in, past the Swiss guards, go all the way inside. They finally put me in this tiny little room with one table and sort of rectangular table. And I was sitting at one end. Bishop comes in, he's sitting at the other end. I get my notebook and my pen and I start asking questions. And he would not look at me. He was like looking, answering, looking here, looking at the table. Like, why the hell isn't he looking at me? And finished the interview, went and started asking around. And they said that there's this thing, or there was a thing back then in the Vatican called something like seduction of the eyes. So if he like looked at me in the eyes, I might have secretly seduced him and it would have been, that whatever. But so there was a whole culture there that I wasn't used to. So being a journalist, you have to be flexible to move into new places and things that are totally unfamiliar and figure it out fast. So it took some figuring out to get the Vatican, but I think I've got it now.
Hello. I'm really happy of these words you're saying, since I feel like you are, I'm in a little tense, but I'm really happy to hear these things said by you. I am Angelica, and I wanted to ask two questions. The first question regards Lebanon, because I saw a few weeks ago that the journalist Marwa Osman, I don't know if you've seen the video, but essentially she was crying live on air while it was reported to her about the death of Nasrallah, the leader of Nasrallah, and essentially she was receiving the information and she was there holding a microphone and she was crying and she was saying that she would have given all her family, all the kids she had to death because she thought that Nasrallah was a such important and clever leader and so on. And she
which channel was this?
The channel, I was looking for it, but the reporter, I can tell you the name is Osman Marwa. You can see it is everywhere, and she was crying. So I was actually asking, what do personal emotion, because it was really strong, her emotion. What do personal emotion play and can affect journalistic neutrality, especially for its job, because she is working on behalf of the journal named something, and is that considered propaganda? This is my first question. And the other one is instead regarding Oriana Fallaci, since we were talking about journalism. I like her so much, and I was asking, since now we're in 2024 and time has passed, there has been the introduction of political correctness, okay? I was asking you, since Oriana, for example, after 2001, the 11th of September, said with the book La rabbia e l'orgoglio, considering Islam as a threat for the West, or also in 2006, she said that Islam is a new fascism, so she's using strong words. Do you think that all of these strong positions on Islam, immigration, and so ever, that brought many polemics, would you think that her ideas would be now, 2021, accepted today and censored for reason of politically correctness or not? Thank you.
Wow, good questions. All right, on the first case, no, I didn't know about that. And no, absolutely not. A journalist should not be saying such things over Nasrallah dying. It's wrong. And if she were working for AP, she would have been fired or removed from that role immediately. Absolutely not. It reminds me of when Berlusconi died. There was an anchor woman on, I think it was TG5, who started tearing up and crying. And okay, Berlusconi started Mediaset and he owns it, but come on, no, that's just not good journalism. No. The only time I've gotten emotional during interviews, I sort of teared up a little bit, and it wasn't, I wasn't on camera, but it was after the L'Aquila earthquake. But I was in, no, it wasn't L'Aquila. It was Amatrice earthquake. And I was in, I don't know, some town, and there was this nun who we found who'd been photographed on this mattress, all bloody. Anyway, it turned out she was from Albania, and I went and found her where she lived, and I was interviewing her, and she was just giving this really emotional interview, and she started crying, and I was like, it was hard not to hold back my emotions. Also, I'd been tired because I hadn't slept for 2 days because we'd just been running around. So journalists, it's hard to control your emotions. And if that woman couldn't control herself, she should have stopped reporting and said, you know, let's just move on to something else. But it just sounds, yeah, no, I believe you. I totally believe you. Yeah, so it does happen though. Oh, Oriana Fallaci. I love Oriana Fallaci. She's fantastic. She's amazing. Yes, what she wrote after September 11th was offensive to a lot of people. I personally wasn't the kind of thing that I approved of or agreed with, but it didn't take away from me, anything that she did as a journalist. She's a truly brilliant woman and amazing journalist. Yes, also, I didn't talk about political correctness. Political correctness, language, it's very complicated. And it's something that AP struggles with every day. And AP has something sort of like the Bible of journalism that a lot of journalists around the world use, which is called the AP style book. And it gives instructions how AP journalists are supposed to use different terminology and everything. They've been redoing everything related to race and gender. For example, you refer to a Black person, and it has to be now with a capital B. Whereas a white person is still small w. There are all sorts of terminology for gender, various gender things. It's very complicated, and they're changing it all the time because they're struggling with it to try and keep up with what's happening in society, but not get swayed too much by things that are just, I don't know, not quite where the society is. So Oriana Fallaci definitely would be considered very politically incorrect. Now, I assume that if she were still alive, she would be allowed to write whatever she wants because she's a brilliant thinker and just published in a place where it can be read, but not necessarily, it wouldn't be AP, I can tell you that. I don't know if we've run out of time or.
Yes, I'm sorry, but this was the last question.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. Thank you all. You're great. You're wonderful. Great questions. You're a great group.
Thank you very much. Sure.